Hi, I'm Jay Thomas, and welcome to Bald Tires, a proud member of the Saskatchewan Podcast Network. Now, restoring a car of any age takes a certain amount of money and time, commitment, and certainly skill. But imagine having the skill and talent to customize that car along the way. My guest today is a guy who's been doing that since he was, well, a little kid. He started with models, and he'll tell us all about it. Alan Thomas joins me, and we're not related anyway, but we got to know each other through the Shifters Car Club in Saskatoon. Alan has done some incredible builds over the years. I've seen some of them, but we're going to talk about all of them and how he got into this passion of his through this part one of the podcast. But also we're going to continue in part two next week with all the incredible builds he's done over the past 50 years. Lots of laughs and good stories on the way. I'm Jay Thomas. Thanks for listening to Bald Tires, because when you make great memories, you make bald tires. The Saskatchewan Podcast Network is supported by Connexus. Wellness, however you define it, is achievable. You don't even need to figure it all out yourself. Talk to Connexus. They'll give you guidance, motivation, and the push you need to reach your goals. They've got you. They're your financial partner, and they know you can achieve your very best, your financial best. Prove them right. Start right now at Connexus Credit Union. The Saskatchewan Podcast Network is also supported by Direct West. Is marketing getting in the way of running your business? Direct West has a local expert team right here in Saskatchewan that will work with you to build your website exactly how you imagine it. Let them help you improve your online presence and head to directwest.com to learn more. Well, I've made my way over to my friend Alan's place, and I've known Alan for a few years now. His name is Alan Thomas. No, we're not in any relation, but Alan's joining me right now for this podcast. Alan, thanks for coming on with me.
Oh, thanks, Jay, for having me.
Yeah, well, you know what? We met with the Shifters Car Club in Saskatoon, exactly. And you're a guy who's got lots of stories, and I thought, that's perfect for the podcast, because this guy's got a story about everything, and we got holistic cars that you got, that you've done. But let's start with this. How many cars do you think you've sort of owned over the years?
I would say close to 200.
Close to 200
is my my estimate.
Your estimate, yeah. Now, some of them were quick cars, right? They were, buy and sell and things like that, kind of fast.
Exactly.
And then a lot of them took a long time, and you rebuilt them from nothing. You pulled them out of the ditch, or you pulled them out of a field, and you put the whole thing back together. And some of the stuff you got, you've highly customized. But, before we get into some of these cars, let's go back to the beginning, because I want to know where Alan Thomas came from and how he got to be a car guy.
Well, I was born in 1947.
Okay.
and I started messing around with wooden cars. They called them soapbox cars in those days.
Yeah.
At probably age 7, somewhere in that ballpark.
So you were already into the car by age 7.
Exactly. Yeah. And then from there, I made my first one that ran by itself with a washing machine engine on the back of it.
Oh, cool.
And it was made out of wood, of course. So that was the first one that I got moving. Later on, as time went on, I guess when I was about 11 or 12, I started building, it was 1958 actually, I started building model cars. And from that, what I did was, the body shops in those days was doing custom cars. And the owner of the body shop just lived down the back alley from us. And what would happen was somebody would come in and explain to them what they wanted customized.
Right.
But what they were seeing and what the guy was telling them was two different things. And it was really expensive in those days to change anything because it was all lead.
Sure.
So they got me to start making models. So I got a lot of input in custom cars at a very young age. I used to use plastic wood. And I would get a model that was really close to what they had. And I would use plastic wood to make the moldings and stuff like that. And then the guy would say, "Hey, that's really good." So the body shop had an idea of what the whole thing was about.
So you spent your time as a kid making prototype custom cars. That's what you were doing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's basically it. I never looked at it that way. I was just making these things out of my head. And so I did that. And then we started with Model A's. Like there was a lot of Model A's around on farms because they were no use to anybody because the technology had long since gone by it.
Right.
With their mechanical brakes and stuff like that. So we went out to the farms, myself and a few of my buddies. We'd get on our bikes and we'd go riding out in the farms, and we'd go up to a farmer and we'd see a Model A and we'd say, "Well, how much for that Model A?" And the farmer would say, "Just get it out of here. I've been farming around that damn thing for years. Just get it out of here." So we would go and get some gasoline and a tire pump, and we'd pump up the tires if they needed it. and we more or less got them going right in the field. And then we'd take them back into town, and we'd clean them up, and some we even painted. One we chopped the top off, stuff like that. And then we'd sell them to the teenagers. And so they and the going price was $40. So
$40 for a whole car.
Yeah, for a whole car.
Ready to go.
Yeah, ready to go. Well, more or less, as much as the Model A was ready to go. But anyhow, that's what we did. So we got into that. Then, as I grew up, I started. The very first custom car was actually a 37 Ford that we got. I think we traded some Model A's for it, but anyway, it was a 37 Ford, and it didn't have any front fenders or anything when we got it. So I put a 48 Ford front end on it.
Oh, cool.
And well, it was really ugly, and we couldn't get a hood, of course, to fit. So that was the way it was. We painted that thing mauve with red and yellow flames. and I don't remember actually driving. I was really young still. I was probably 14 at the time. We got it running and we sold it. But that was the very first so-called hot rod that I did. Then when I was in grade 8, I built a 50 Ford with a 56 Thunderbird engine in it.
Oh, cool.
And I drove that quite a bit. I wasn't supposed to because I was, again, 14 years old, but I used to drive it to school. so it was a different time. And,
yeah, that's right.
And that's what it was. So
was this small town Saskatchewan, or were you
this
in the
was
city?
in Nipawin, Saskatchewan.
It was in Nipawin, okay, yeah.
It's where I grew up. So that was about it for that. Okay, after that, I came to school in Saskatoon, to business college in Saskatoon, and I was driving a 47 Merc. 4-door sedan, one of those great big things.
Yep.
And I had that, and I took the crank out of it. So I bought an American Pontiac for $25, and drove it back and forth to Nipawin at that.
Wow.
So that was kind of the history of the early stuff. After that, I graduated from business college, and I bought my father's '61 Meteor.
Okay.
A big car, huh? Because the other ones were kind of not that good. Let's put it that way. And I started, and I went to Miota for a summer job, and it wound up being 14 years.
Wow.
So I actually became manager of the store when my good friend Herb Sparrow, who was a senator, bought the store. And him and I were friends, even though I was always saying abolish the Senate, and he was always telling me why not to. But anyhow, we were good friends, and he bought the store, and he said I wanted you to run it, so I did for that many. But while I was in Miota, that's when I started building a lot of cars there.
Okay.
That's when I got into Thunderbirds, 59 and 60 Thunderbirds, and I did 9 of those cars, and one after the other, basically, rebuilding them. So that was that. And then also, while I was there, I also built 63 convertibles and stuff like that, a whole bunch of cars.
So you were, was every one of these customized?
Most of them were customized.
Yeah.
I did a lot of custom cars and sold them. I did some. There was a guy in Edmonton who had 5 of my cars, and that's that's more. I built one for his wife, actually. It was a 63, what was it, Comet? One of those Comet deals, Mavericks or whatever they were.
Yep, right.
I did one for her, and then he wanted me to do another one, and I did one for him, and they went out and bought 3 other ones. So they had more cars than I had my cars customer. Actually, now is the first time in my whole life that we've owned as many cars ourselves, like between my son and I and my brother and things like that. But the cars that I've built, so that's what it is.
Cool. So okay. Let me ask you this.
Okay.
Where did you were building custom cars from a super young age?
Yep.
You were doing it, as you were in Miota, running that store and kind of as a hobby and a side gig and all that stuff. Where did you learn to do that? Did you teach yourself everything?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting thing too. Glad you brought that up, Jay. How I got interested in all this stuff was the bodywork stuff. I would go to the body shop and just hang out with the guys, and they would teach me this stuff. I didn't, they saw I was interested, and they would teach me, and I'd hammer on dents and stuff like that, and little things like that. So that's how I learned bodywork, was just from that. The engine part, one of my friends' dad was a really good mechanic. and I would go and help him on his stuff that he was doing. So he taught me how to, and I can't say I'm really great, about being able to rebuild a whole engine. I guess an engine, but transmissions, no.
Right.
And that and the upholstery. One of my friends, his dad owned an upholstery shop.
Yep.
So he was really interested in upholstery too. So his dad taught him and I how to do upholstery. And I can still remember the first time we did a headliner. His name was Terry. Terry and I decided we were going to put a headliner in a '60 Chevy car. So okay, here we go. So it's leather. So okay, so and it was striped. In those days, everything was striped. So anyway, we're putting this headliner in, and we sewed it all up and had it sitting there, and we pulled it all tight, and it was actually black and red, and one of the stripes was wider than the other one.
Uh-oh.
And his dad comes along and says, "Didn't you do a stretch test?" And apparently we didn't know enough that we had to stretch the material and it had to be stitched up differently. But anyway, that was our first deal with upholstery.
So you had enough people around you when you were kind of growing up and through that process, people who taught you this stuff. But you had somebody, like you said, who was into mechanics, somebody in interiors, and then a whole bunch of guys into bodywork. Yes. They were using lead at that time?
Yes, the body.
Bondo wasn't a thing yet.
No. And it wasn't for quite a few years, because the first Bondo was like water putty.
Okay.
And it would come off really easy. So it wasn't until probably maybe 20, 25 years ago now that white lightning came along, and it was actually something that adhered to something.
White lightning.
That's what it was called, white lightning. And it was actually something that actually kind of worked.
Yeah.
But the stuff nowadays is fantastic stuff.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, it's come a long way. But you were using lead to customize all this stuff, and you were already at that point cutting roofs and channeling stuff and Frenching tail lights and all that.
I wasn't. I was designing this stuff at that time. I never used lead. I just never did that.
Okay.
But mainly in the body shops when I was learning was mainly pounding and that kind of stuff. Chopping and stuff, I didn't physically do it, but I designed some of those cars that we chopped.
Cool.
I've chopped cars since then myself, and the one I have now, I didn't. Oddly enough, the Meteor that I have right now with the chop top, I didn't chop the top. Somebody else had chopped it back in 1982.
Okay.
But they screwed up because they when you chop a top, you got to chop the back where the back window is and the front where the front window is, and then you fill it in the middle. Mm-hmm. So you got to make those things fit, and they didn't do that. I had to design a back window for it, which was really, really tough.
So that we've kind of talked about your first car, which is phenomenal, and all the cool stuff you learned as you were a kid growing up, and kind of what got you into it. And obviously you were just into cars. I was the same way as a kid, just fascinated by them from a really super young age, and I played with cars, and you've got models you built and made starting in the 50s and customized those pretty cool and learned to do all that. Let's go through some of the cars now. You said there's about 200 of them that you've had, but we got a selection we wanted to talk about, some cool ones that you've done along the way, and we got some pictures. By the way, go to jthomasauto.ca. You're going to find the pictures there of all these cool cars we're talking about. Okay, let's go with the oldest one that's in the pack here. If I go through the list, there is a 41. We'll just go by. We won't go by when you got them. We'll just go by the oldest model year.
Okay,
how about that?
Whichever way you want to go.
There's a 41 Dodge truck. And it's finished in orange now, and you guys pulled it out of somewhere.
There's a story on that one. What happened there was I worked for Sherwood Chev, and there was a salesman there who had this 41 Dodge in his backyard, and the trees had grown through it and everything. But what happened was his neighbor didn't like the idea that it was sitting there. He wasn't appreciative of it. So he phoned the city, and the city gave the guy's name is Ward, 30 days to get rid of the thing. So Ward comes and says, he was bitching about the city, and rightly so. But anyway, at that time, I'd made a bet with some of the guys in the shifters that I could build a hot rod for $2,500. So and not use it. So not use anything that I had in the shop or anything. I could build a hot rod for $2,500. And about the same time, Ward comes along with this car. So I said, hey, that'll work for the hot rod. And he sold it to me for $600. So I'm good now. I'm really on the way. So a buddy of mine who worked for a towing company, and I go over there with the big tow truck, and we have to get in there with chainsaws and cut the trees out that's holding it down. And this is in the city, so you can understand what the neighbor was thinking of.
Sure.
But anyway, we got it out of there and we hauled it home. It was about a 1.5 or 2 ton truck. It was a big truck when we hauled it out of there, and it looked like it was probably used for grain because they'd cut the back end out of the end gate. So anyway, we haul that home, and now I say, okay, now I'm going to get an S10 because I thought, well, that'll work really good.
Sure.
So I put an ad on Kijiji, and sure enough, a guy phones me up, and his S10 had been taken off the road by the city because it was too rusty. But it ran really good and everything. So I said, okay, I'll go and do that. So I got the S10, and I think I paid $600 for that as well. So now I'm into $1,200, and it looks like I'm really making hay here. And so I get them both home and strip them all both off, and then put the body of the Dodge onto the chassis of the S10. But I wasn't paying attention when I did it. I felt that the front of the Dodge was equal with the running boards. So I chopped it up, and then you put the cab on first. So I stick the cab on. I channeled it 11 inches. Looked really cool until we put the front on, and it was on the ground. so that wasn't going so well. So now I had to raise it up 4 inches, I believe I did, or 3 inches. Raised it up, and then we put it back on. So from there, we took an interior, put it in, and my $2,500 was going past really fast because it wasn't that bad because I still left the 6-cylinder in there with the 4-speed.
Yep.
But then the tires looked really ugly, so I went and bought some wheels and stuff like that, and I was, $1,000 here, $1,000 there, and I was out of the ballpark already. So that went by, and then I painted it, and I drove it like that for a while. Pounded all the dents out. It was a really bad for taking the dents out of. Even the roof was dented. They tried to drive it under something, and even the roof was bad. But I got it all straightened out, and it looked pretty good. And then I painted it in my backyard, because my buddy at Platinum Paint and Body hadn't put his new shop in there yet, so he only had this little paint booth in there.
Wouldn't fit the truck.
Well, it would fit the truck, but when you paint this thing, you had to paint it all in pieces.
Oh.
So you had to paint both sides, and you had to do it all at once. So, under the fenders, the hoods, and, everything, every little piece was painted individually. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So you had to have a big paint booth. But anyway, so I get up in the morning at 5 a.m, and I spent black plastic. I'd already made racks for all these parts. And I spread black plastic all over the backyard. And I hung these parts up on the racks, and then I went around the neighborhood with Raid, and so that's what we did. So I got it all set up, and I started painting about 6, and it was a perfect day. The humidity was perfect. There was no wind.
Yeah,
it was just perfect. So I painted the whole thing and out in the yard. And my buddy Alan came by afterwards and said, "Hey, you couldn't have did better in the paint booth," and it actually turned out really good.
Oh, that's cool.
It was more good luck than good management, though, to tell you the truth. But anyhow, the paint job is still on the truck. Several years later, we'll stick with this one. Several years later, I gave the truck to my son. It was tough to drive with that 4-speed in there. The cab was so small that you almost had to open the door to shift gears. and it didn't have a tilt steering wheel, so everything was just cramped in there, and it was pretty bad. So anyway, I gave it to him, and he had it for about 6 months, and then he said, "Dad, we should maybe put some engine in this thing." So we bought a dragster truck, and it was also an S10, and took the motor, transmission, and rear end out of it, and put it in this other truck. So that's what it is now. I'm estimating it has about 400 horsepower, and it probably weighs about 2,800 pounds.
Holy!
So I'm thinking that it'd probably be a good 13-second car. He hasn't ran it yet, but he will run it sometime this year.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
Anyway, that's that one.
That's that one. Okay, let's move up the list. So the next one I can see is a 41 Dodge, and again, go to jthomasauto.ca for pictures. I think we move into Orange Crush. And that's the name you gave it. It's a 52 Studebaker Starlight Coupe.
That one we bought as a supposedly finished car. This car had a really interesting history. It came from Las Vegas. The speed shop in Las Vegas had done the car.
Wow.
And it wasn't, done totally right. They had done a fantastic job. I think what had happened, if I think about it, is they got the front end done, and then they lost out of time or interest or whatever they did. Mm-hmm. And they built that whole front end on an English wheel.
Oh, wow.
The whole thing was shaped on an English wheel by hand, and it was done really, really well. And that's the front fenders. And then when they got to the rest of the car, it was really bad. So it even had the cloth coated wiring in it, and they didn't put any fuses in it. And
oh boy.
And it was yeah. So anyhow, we drove it. It was a lime green thing. My son drove it quite a bit, and I drove it quite a bit. But then we decided that we would change it. Let's put it that way. So we cut the back off of it, and we sunk 259 Cadillac taillights on either side, and we rounded the whole back of the car in a roll pan, which was really fun.
I bet it.
Yeah, my buddy Al and I him and I did this kind of car together, and we were sitting there having a few pop, and decided that how we were going to do this car. So rather than think really hard on it, we just started cutting and welding and
making. Yeah.
Yeah, and it turned out it looked like a snowplow at the back. And we decided, well, that's not so good.
Oh,
so we cut it all off. We did a little bit more thinking with less pop, and we created the car Orange Crush, and it was a really good car, and I eventually sold that car and kept the Dodge or the Dodge truck.
Okay, so the 52 Studebaker Orange Crush, what was under the hood?
It was a mighty 305.
Mighty 305.
Oh yeah, it had no horsepower. It was strictly for looks. Yeah, it was that kind of a car. But
so it looked really cool, but really didn't do a whole lot.
Well, it sounded really cool.
Yeah.
And it looked really cool, but it wasn't beating too many people. It had a really big high. If you look at the pictures, it had a really big high air scoop on it and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
It looked like something that a drag car is what it looked like, and it sounded like one too. I don't think, so it wasn't bad that way.
That's pretty fun. Pretty fun.
It was a good car.
The next on the list, I think, is a 53 MG kit car.
Oh yeah, that one I took on trade. It was in rough shape when I got it. It was even in rougher shape when I drove it, because what had happened was another car that they seemed to think that you don't need fuses in, and what happened was, with this car, I got it going and it was running and everything, and I put an air cleaner on it, and I was turning it into my back alley, and the air cleaner shorted out the wires, and we had a big fire going, and I couldn't turn the ignition off because it all burned together, so I had to run home about a block away and get a wrench to disconnect the battery. But that car was, when I got it, it didn't handle, it was just not that good of a car.
Okay, it was a kit car, right?
It was a kit.
So what was it? What was it made out of?
It was kind of a kit car. I say kind of a kit car because it was built in a factory in Pennsylvania, and that's what they were doing. They were building these cars, and they were guaranteeing that they would look just like the MG, and they actually did. I can't. One had the windshield wiper on the top, and one had the windshield wiper on the bottom.
Okay,
but that was the only thing I could see that was different.
So it was like a replica then of an MG.
Well, that's what they were. They were replica cars.
Yeah.
But they were supposed to be these close replicas, and they were. It was another one of it was Volkswagen engine in it. So
okay,
anything with a Volkswagen engine is
and a rear engine car.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it had big long hood and all that. It looked really cool. It ran pretty cool. It was a lot of work for nothing. but other than that,
Why was it for nothing?
Well, it just didn't perform. It wasn't
because underneath it was just a Volkswagen Beetle.
Exactly. You hit it right on the core. You were just driving a Volkswagen.
Yeah. So what there's things you can do, I think, now, but I mean not a lot really that makes them excellent.
We kind of souped it up a little bit. Like I said, we put those air cleaners and stuff on it and opened up some of the valves, but it still was a Volkswagen. And I didn't really feel all that safe in it, to tell you the truth.
Is it fiberglass? Is it made of fiberglass?
Yeah, it was fiberglass. Yeah, they were fiberglass, and it was easy. It's easy to work on fiberglass because it's easy to patch, really, to tell you the truth.
Mm-hmm. But it's not all that safe, right? It doesn't hold.
Oh well, I don't know. No, it's not all that safe. That one wasn't. I think fiberglass as a whole is just as safe as steel. Honestly, if you got it in the right car.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of cars today are fiberglass and carbon fiber and plastic.
Yeah, no, that's true.
You know,
yeah, that's
like
right.
plastic, like my Camaro was the doors and a whole bunch of it was just plain plastic.
I guess as long as there's sort of steel structure behind it, it's okay,
Well,
right?
yeah, if the steel structure was mounted onto anything that was any good, it would be.
That's right.
You know,
that's
honestly,
true.
they're not the best of things. But I think that the steel today, especially on some of these cars today, is so thin that it's just like it tears up real easy.
Yeah.
You know.
Well,
so,
I think it's just designed to be different, right? So instead of being a big solid impact bumper and thick steel,
right.
It crushes up, but you'll be surprised how well the structure holds around the people, right? So
and that's the way they should be.
Exactly,
it
right?
wears off a lot of the energy.
Yeah, and it sort of you sort of sacrifice the car to save the people versus the other way around.
Exactly. Yeah. I remember back in the old days when I was stock car racing, we used to build those things just like army tanks, and when you hit something or something, everything went into your body.
Yeah,
all the impact went into your body. You were sore all week, but you still got
bruised
back
up and knocked off,
yeah.
Okay, well, you open that can of worms. Stock car racing.
Well, yeah.
Tell me before we keep going about the other cars. Tell me a little bit about what you did with that and how you got involved.
Stock car racing was just in its infancy in Canada at the time. They were actually racing around on fairs on the horse tracks.
Yep.
And these fair tracks were 5/8 a mile because they were horse tracks, and that was the going for 5/8 a mile. Mm-hmm. So you would get going really fast, sort of. and these cars were so bad, they were called jalopies, and they were so bad that if you went through the corner, and these were big long corners, if you went through the corner at 40 miles an hour, they fell over. So that's where I started, was in those. Then I ran a coupe for a year in Prince Albert, I think it was.
Okay.
Yeah, Prince Albert. Ran a coupe, and then from there I went to a 50 Ford that I ran out of Melfort. Now, don't ask me why I ran out of, well, I kind of do know, because they were just starting up a club there, and I was from Nipawin.
It's kind of close. Yeah, sure.
But the fact of the matter was, at that time I lived in Meota. so that was the car I drove. I had that one, and eventually I just gave it to a friend of mine in Nipawin, and he drove it in Melfort after I did a few times. Then I went from that to a 59 Pontiac, which I drove here in Saskatoon in the fairgrounds.
Oh, cool.
Because between the track in Saskatoon used to be on 8th Street. It was about where McKercher is. And in between building Bridge City and that track there, we raced a year in the fairgrounds, much to the chagrin of everybody in Saskatoon. But anyhow, we did race that year, and I remember there was kind of railway ties on end around the corner, and then there was an 8-foot fence behind it, and I spun out and I hit the railway ties, and they went down like a ramp. And I wound up sitting on that ramp and on the fence. That was my memories of that track. So then from there, I went to North Battleford. Well, I lived in North Battleford, but the next year I talked the fair board and some of my friends who owned a big construction company there and the fair board into building a track at the racetrack in North Battleford, which I became president of the stock car club at that time. So that's where I went, and we ran there. It was really successful that year because the track wasn't ready in Saskatoon, so all the guys from Saskatoon ran there. I remember I used to go on the air on the radio show there and promise everybody that if we didn't have 20 cars, it would be free. No, we weren't going to charge.
Wow.
If we couldn't do that. So, because I believed a lot in the show. But then as time went on, I got really nervous about this whole thing because because the North Balfour Soccer Club was so widespread. There was people from Glassland, Lloydminster, all over the place.
Yeah.
And you heard about these cars, but you never saw them, so you didn't know how many cars he had. So I'm getting real nervous about this 20 car deal.
Yeah.
So I started phoning a bunch of my friends that I'd raced with in Rosetown and Regina and Saskatoon and stuff like that. Hey, you guys owe me a favor. Could you show up here? Because I'm going to be in big trouble here. And so anyway, they showed up. We had like 42 cars there for that opening day, and it went really well, and lots of fans.
Wow, that's a great story.
Yeah. So from there, of course, I've moved to Saskatoon and,
Yep.
and been involved with stock car racing here, particularly with Brad Reddick. But Alan Johnson and I, before that, used to run invitationals around Western Canada in between. So
Now, Brad Reddick is number 88
Yes.
right now in
Yep.
the sportsman division,
yes,
right?
yes.
And so you're part of that team. You help with setup and stuff like that, right, of the vehicle, right?
Yeah, Brad and I go back. My buddy Alan Johnson and I, we raced all over Western Canada. We raced 40, 45 races a year. We raced invitationals, 2-day invitationals. And Alan passed away, and so I just walked away from racing. I didn't do anything with racing for, I don't know, probably 5, 6, 7, 8, quite a long time. I don't know how long it was. But Brad Reddick and I were friends all the way back since the 80s. Huh? And Brad was, always involved in stock car racing here. One day he phoned me up and said, "Will you come and help me?" And I thought about it, and I thought about it for a good, probably 2 weeks before I decided, yeah, I'll go back, because Brad was a really good guy, and so maybe I can help him. So I said, okay, I'll come back. So I went back and ran. We were running street stock at the time. The first year we didn't do much. The second year we came in second, and we would have won I had said that, and it's true that we would have won the second year if we would have just got the car started, because he had this. It was the final race. We were 5 points ahead, and all we would have had to do was start the car and go around the track, and we would have been good. But he had this automatic transmission in the car.
Yep.
And we couldn't push start it, and we couldn't get it going. So we lost that one. So then I got really involved after that. There's a company called Crazy Kalicki in New York.
Okay.
That used to supply Alan and I with our parts. And so I phoned Crazy and said, like I need a setup for this car. It was actually a Monte Carlo. And those things are basically grocery getters, and they're not race cars at all. And we were racing against Camaros and stuff. So anyway, I said, what do you guys, I need a setup. Really good. I don't like these grocery getters. I hate them. You can't set them up properly. What do you think? And so between them and I, we sat down and we figured it out on the phone.
Yep.
What we're going to do. And they sent some shocks and springs and stuff and put them in the car, and we won the next year. Actually,
wow.
we won it by so much that we won it. We didn't even have to start the car on the last day. So we took care of that. So we won with that. Was the street stock division. We did that. We then moved on to trucks, and we didn't do very well in trucks. We were middle of the pack at best. Then after that, in the last couple of years of trucks, Brad ran by himself. And I always told him that if you were ever going to run a real race car, literally, just phone me and I'll go half with you. If we're going to buy a real race car, phone me and I'll go half with you. So one day after I guess he'd been racing a couple of years without me, he phoned me up and said, "Oh, let's go sportsman racing." So I said, "Okay, fine, let's do that." So we went out and bought a car, and we bought all the parts and set it up, and we actually did really quite well. We actually wound up third in the thing. We won the rookie trophy, we won third, we won all kinds of trophies. So that worked out really well, and that's where we are now. We're not racing this year because of COVID, running a limited schedule. So we decided not to run, but we will be running next year.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, we'll be back.
That's a lot of fun.
So yeah, and that's stock car racing. Maybe we'll even move up into supers. Who knows?
Yeah, that's fantastic. Alan, what's kind of coming to me as we're talking about this is, man, you are one of the ultimate car guys.
Yeah.
No, really. I mean, you're into designing and the paintwork and the artistic side of it and the upholstery side of it, that's all very artistic,
Yes.
And then you're good with the mechanical side of it too, but you're amazing at cutting things up and putting them back together, and then you go racing and you go driving, and
We took a run at drag racing one year, and that didn't work out. Gotta throw that in.
well, you told me you're not so great on a motorcycle, so I guess it's gotta have four wheels, right?
And also I built hydroplanes.
Hydroplanes?
And raced hydroplanes.
Oh my gosh.
Designed hydroplanes. I actually designed a hydroplane in California. What happened in this story with hydroplanes is, when I was in high school, I decided that I was going to build a hydroplane as in shop. So I'm going to build this hydroplane. But we made the plans out of the Popular Mechanics.
Yeah,
We
right.
blew up the plans. It was in Popular Mechanics, and we blew up the plans. Just kind of blew them up and measured everything, and I built this hydroplane. So after I built it, I ran it at Candle Lake. They used to have a race, different horsepower and stuff. So it was just an ordinary race against ordinary boats and stuff. There wasn't hydroplane racing or anything. So anyway, I show up with this hydroplane, and I actually rented the motor out of a rental place. And stuck it on this thing, and it was a 15-horse motor, and I took it all the way up to the unlimited class. I run everything all the way up to unlimited. It's a guy with a 245s on his boat beat me, but up to that, and so I said, this is kind of cool. But they had a circuit down in southern Saskatchewan and the northern states, so the next year I took it down there, and the thing weighed 49 pounds. And I got a motor from Mercury, the boat dealership in Nipawin.
Okay.
Got this motor racing motor from Mercury, and it was light. I could go down and I'd have the boat under one arm, and I had the motor under the other arm. And these other guys are all out there tuning their motors, and they had all these props and stuff, and I had two props, and that was it, in case I broke one. And they had exhaust everywhere and everything like that. But the only trick was theirs didn't really, they were basically flat bottom boats. They looked like hydroplanes and stuff, but they really didn't plane.
Right.
They didn't have the pontoon set. They didn't have a lot of stuff set. So what you had to do, these boats wouldn't float. So boats that don't float, there you go. What else can go wrong? What can go wrong with that?
Go wrong.
So you got a guy holding the boat, and you fire up the engine at the dock. So everybody lines up along the dock, and you hold the boat, and then they say go, and away you go. And so you go out, and then it's an oval once you get out there. Huh? So I ran maybe wide open for a little wee bit until I got out there. But during the race, I never ran more than 3/4, and I could just walk on them.
Really?
So it was really good. But they were the old rounded ones, huh?
That's cool.
So the name of the company was Glenell. A doctor friend of mine who was young at the time, and has, like 7 years is quite a bit when you're 21 and he's 14.
That's right.
But it isn't so much when you're 47 and he's 40.
Yeah.
So anyhow, he became a doctor, and I got my gallbladder out. They took it out, and in 4 weeks I felt really good. And I said, well, I can go back to work, Bob. And he looked it up in his insurance, and he says his insurance says I can't go back to work for eight weeks. Oh. So anyway, he said, why don't you build another one of those hydroplanes? So I did. And what I did was I phoned down to Popular Mechanics, and I got a really nice girl there who actually found me the plans again.
Wow.
For the boat. And then I found out that Glenell was still in existence, the guys who done that.
Right.
Done the boat. And so I contacted them. I was driving a semi at that time down in the States. And so I was down there, and I dropped into their place, and we got talking, and one thing and another. And I said, well, how about if I design a boat that looks more like a boat today? Because these were the big rounded things, huh?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so they said, that would be really cool. So I got a couple of runs down to California, and went and worked on designing this boat down there. And it looked quite a bit like the boats that you saw here, a smaller version of the modified boats you saw here at the river.
Wow.
So, and it ran really well.
That's cool.
So yeah, that's my boating series.
Your boating
experience.
Wow.
And it was fun doing. And actually that last one was when I quit driving those things. Was the prototype that I built? I was testing it, and you got to be really careful. It's sort of like surfing. You got to really watch how you take the waves and stuff. And I wasn't paying attention, and I plowed into one of those waves, and I was going, well, I would be going 55, 60 miles an hour.
Oh.
And they went, and I plowed into one of those waves, and I went out of the boat, like a long ways out of the boat. But I had a kill switch on it, so it died. It didn't go running. It didn't go. It
Running
didn't get
away.
It didn't get away. But when you hit the water, you kind of bounce, and then you just go under like real hard.
Yep.
And you gotta. I have asthma, so it really bothered me a lot, because you got to wait for your life preserver to tell you which way to swim, because you're under the water and you don't know which is up and which is down or anything.
Yeah,
huh?
that's right. Yeah.
So you got to wait for your life jacket to start floating you in one direction, and so you don't really get a chance to get a whole bunch of air in your lungs.
No.
So
Not when you're flying off of something.
That's right. So after that, that's when I quit doing the boats. Anyway, that's the story.
That's the boat story. Cool.
That's the boat story.
Okay, so we're going to go back here to 1951. You got a car in the garage, Alan, that's super cool. You wouldn't even know what it is by looking at it. It's a 51 Meteor Victoria, a Mercury. Right?
Right. It was sold by the Mercury dealerships. That was a Ford sold Fords, and then the Mercury dealerships were separate in those days, and they needed a cheaper car to sell, so they just kind of modified the Ford. So it was just basically a Ford with different chrome on it. And
With different chrome.
Grill. Yeah.
And they did that for years, basically,
Yes,
right?
yes.
That's even Mercury into the 80s did the
Yeah,
same thing with a lot of stuff.
Yeah, any time that the difference was between them. It was a Mercury Lincoln dealership is what they were.
Yep.
And they were supposed to be a little high end. That's where the Edsel came in and all that kind of stuff.
Right. Okay, this 51 Meteor, where did you get it?
Okay. Where I got it was from a guy, Rod Rosenfeld had it, and it was out in his Quonset in Kalonzi is where it was. And I knew it was there for 4 or 5 years. I knew it was there. It wasn't doing anything but collecting mice, dirt, dust. Anyway, it was out there, and it was just a shell of a car. And where he got it from, he got it, originally it was built in British Columbia, and it was, and everybody, it looked more like the Batmobile than anything, but it was painted flat black, and it was really ugly, and all the body putty was falling off of it, and all kinds of stuff like that. He got it from a guy who claimed that they started working on it in 1982 in BC, and then they brought it out here, and he had it. It was sitting on a frame that they said they had the motor and stuff running, but there's no way they did, because one side was 3 inches longer than the other side. and not only that, what they did was they used a metric frame, and they put leaf springs on it, and it didn't fit worth two hoots in hell. Let's put it right. and they had almost a foot long lowering blocks in the back, and it was goofy. So anyway, that was the frame that was under it. So how I bought it, it played on my mind, and I'd already built a model car that I'd always dreamt I was going to build the real car of. And I kind of looked at this thing and I thought, well, I can maybe do it with this. And so that's what I did. I brought it home.
So you built a model car
Yes.
years ago.
Yes.
In fact, it's over here in your showcase.
Yes.
And then you went and built the car based on the model.
I did that.
That's cool.
Yeah. And it was always a car that I wanted to build. So this all kind of played into what I wanted to do. So that's why I wound up with the car. It was really bad, and it looks nothing like it did now. But I'll bet you I used at least 50 discs, cutting discs to cut it up. I had pieces cut out of that thing all over the place.
Holy cow.
And they had Chrysler taillights in it, but they weren't done well. They came to a really sharp point at the back, and it was solid steel back there. So cutting all of that out was not fun, but that's what I did.
You took an already customized car, and then you changed it to customize it the way you wanted it to be.
Right.
To be. Okay, so it's like the roof is chopped.
Yes. The reason why I did what you just said was I could see enough custom work on it that I wanted to do, and especially rounding the edges of the hood and the trunk and stuff like that. It takes a long time to do that, and that was already done. So stuff like that, and also the roof was chopped. It wasn't done right, at least not right the way I would do it. But what happened was they didn't pay attention to the back window, and so it was really difficult to come up with a solution. I wanted to keep the back window the way it was because of the lines of the car. I had other things I was going to do if I couldn't do that. I was going to either cut the back off of an ordinary 50 Ford and lay it in there, or make a Carson top that you can lift off, like a fake convertible top there.
Right, yeah.
So that was my other two plans, but I really first of all wanted to do it the way it was. I went to all the glass guys in Saskatoon and all the plastic guys, and none of them could come up with a solution. I even contacted people who make helicopters in BC, and tried to see if they could come up with something, and nobody seemed to be able to come up with a really good idea. So I got up one Saturday morning and went out there with some cardboard and started working on it, and I got it so it looked pretty good with that piece of cardboard in it. So I went over to the co-op and got some plexiglass and chopped it up and stuck it in there. And I said, yeah, that we can do that.
Yeah.
So then I got then we put in a new stock windshield in the stock car. So I took the old windshield, which is Lexan, and cut it up and put it in. And that's what's in it now is a piece of Lexan.
That's clever, isn't it? Make your own.
Yeah, well, and it looks pretty good.
Yeah.
And hardly anybody even notices or even knows what it is. So, but it came out really good. As for the rest of the car, I took it off that Mickey Mouse frame. And I bought an S10 but this one was really good because it already had the motor in it, the transmission in it when I bought it. So I didn't have to put the motor and transmission and stuff in it. It's a 350 with the 350 automatic. And so that's what I did. And again we took and it was a drag truck too. It was fiberglass truck. So took the body off of it, and then you have to modify the floors and stuff quite a bit. It isn't just a matter of just taking it and dropping it on there.
Right.
And the other thing is, cars are a lot more difficult than trucks because you can kind of center where the cab is, and then you can modify the box when you get to it, to make it fit. Whereas a car, the whole thing's got to fit. So that it was a little more difficult than doing a truck, but it came out pretty good. There was a lot of the stuff. It is kind of cramped for space where the motor is, and also there's a kick up in the trunk, in the back of the S10. So you have to really manufacture a trunk back there. So I also have a fuel cell in the back as well on that thing. So,
well, I mean, for anybody who's looking at pictures, you go to jthomasauto.ca. You'll see pictures of this crazy thing, this Meteor. It's a Meteor monster, really, because it's made up of stuff that you wouldn't think is a Meteor at all, or a 51. But for example, like on the hood, you sort of put this sort of channel into it, carve this groove that gives it some character lines. The nose of it, the actual grill, is off of a 50 what?
It's off of a 51 Meteor.
50 Meteor.
Yeah, but no, it's off a 50 Meteor, not a 51.
Right.
The 51 was kind of a goofy thing, so didn't use it. But the 50, actually the 49, 50 are the same, and the 51 was different. But the hole was the same in the front.
Now, the original car would have had little sort of flat tail, oval-shaped tail lights sticking out the back of it.
Yeah.
Kind of a big round butt that it had. But now it's got fins.
Yeah.
And did it come with fins when you got it, or did you? No.
No, that I put 56 Chev quarters on the back.
Yep.
Is what I did, and a guy in Arkansas made me the tail lights. He builds custom tail lights. And he made those for me.
That's so cool.
And people always ask me, well, what are those taillights out of? And I said, they're just out of this car.
Nothing.
That's the way it is.
One only.
But yeah, that's what it is.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, the car, is I did it in probably, Oh, less than 3 years,
Wow.
which is pretty good for these cars.
Pretty quick for a complete custom
Yeah,
car like that.
and,
you
and
know?
there was nothing there at all. Like no interior, no anything in the car when I got it.
You know what, Alan? We're going to leave it right there for right now. We'll pick up next episode with part 2 of this podcast and go over the rest of the amazing builds you've done. Just a selection of them. And if you're listening right now and you want to see pictures of these incredible cars, go to jthomasauto.ca. Hit those like and subscribe buttons, and thanks again for listening to Bald Tires. I'm Jay Thomas. Catch you next time.